Hello students. Today I'm going to talk about part 3 of this World War I presentation. And this is based on two major points. The first point is about the United States leadership as the war ended and what role we played at the end of the war. And the second point is about the aftermath and the results and consequences of World War I and what happened at the end and the legacy it left. 3 points here. There was an armistice. Armistice means a truce, to end a war, to end battle. It's like waving a white flag. You stop fighting. Ceasefire. This officially ended the war. Germany agreed and surrendered. This happened on the 11th month, the 11th day, and the 11th hour on November the 11th, 1918. November the 11th is synonymous with Veterans Day, and we'll talk more about that later. And this happened after the last major offensive of the war, which was the second battle of the Marne, which happened in France, July the 18th. Both sides suffered major losses, but Germany suffered the worst and were weakened. Another aspect I want to bring up here is at the end of World War I, this man right here, President Woodrow Wilson, prepared a peace plan known as the 14 Points that called for the formation of the League of Nations, a peacekeeping organization negotiated in 1918. I'm going to talk about that more later in detail, and you're going to have to watch some videos on Woodrow Wilson and the League of Nations. The third point here is that the United States decided to not join the League of Nations because the U.S. Senate failed to ratify the Treaty of Versailles, and there are primary resource documents on this page that indicates that. Other tidbits about the aftermath of the war in detail. Before the war ended, President Woodrow Wilson met with his advisors and crafted a peace plan called the 14 Points on January the 8th, 1918. The 14 points were a basic outline of ideas to prevent war, rebuild Europe, and to prevent the Central Powers from taking a grudge and want to fight again. The 14 points call for freedom of ships on the seas. So submarines won't attack naval ships and passenger ships like the Lusitania. That makes people angry and pick a side. Shrinking the size of militaries like the Army and the Navies, and lowering tariffs to help out countries economically. And other tidbits I'm not going to read about. The League of Nations had 42 nations a part of it. The League of Nations was an organization or Congress of Nations formed to settle international disputes, maintain peace, and collective security. It was basically a tiger with no teeth. It couldn't enforce anything. It couldn't come to the aid of another country. It was pointless. It was powerless. The United States government, the Senate, which has 100 members, which serve in the legislative branch, they voted that the United States to not join the League of Nations because they didn't want to become involved with other countries and their problems. And this is going to upset Woodrow Wilson. He went back to the White House and wept over this, and it stressed him out that his own government would support a peace plan that would keep us from future conflicts. And I'm going to tell you why later on. This is called isolationism or neutrality, and that means you don't want to take a side in a war or be involved with another country. So the United States started off being isolationist, and they ended the war isolationist or neutral. The final peace plan for the war was called the Treaty of Versailles, and the leaders of the Allied powers met to discuss what to do to maintain peace after World War I, and they wanted to dig it in and take it out on Germany. They wanted to blame Germany for the war, and they actually wound up blaming them for the war, and they forced Germany to pay back money called reparations, where you had to repair the damage that you cause to other countries. Like if you break something, you buy it or you pay for it. And that's what they basically told Germany. And Central Power countries and their leaders were not allowed to attend. So that's going to pose a big problem there. Representatives at this meeting where they talked about the Treaty of Versailles were Woodrow Wilson, who represented the U.S., Lloyd George, who represented Great Britain, Georges Clemenceau represented France, and Vittorio Orlando represented Italy. Not all Allied powers leaders agreed to the plans of the Versailles Treaty. Countries like France and Great Britain really wanted to punish Germany and make them pay reparations, and they succeeded. They succeeded in that. Woodrow Wilson said, I don't want to have any part of that. Let's be peaceful. Let's not spike the football. Let's not rub it in Germany's face. Let's not do that because they're going to get mad again. And it's going to cause them to want to fight back. It's sort of like showing good sportsmanship. It's like if you win a football game by a large margin, you don't rub it in the players' faces and you don't say, ha ha ha, we kicked your butt. No, Woodrow Wilson didn't want to do that. So he wanted peace with dignity and not rub it in. But they didn't listen to him. Like I said earlier, Germany had to pay for the war. They paid $33 billion to the countries that they attacked. And they're going to have difficulty repaying that back. And that's not going to be a good result there. Other penalties were that Germany had to lose her colonies. Germany also lost territories in Europe that they controlled, like Alsace-Lorraine and areas that are now known as Poland and Luxembourg. So Germany had an empire in Europe that was shrunk down to size. They were demilitarized, which means that their military was downsized to like a small group of soldiers. So Germany was treated like a whipped puppy, and Hitler's going to rise to power because of that, because he's going to tell the Germans to seek revenge against those Allied powers who punished them and blamed them for World War I. So I gave you basically a prelude to World War II. And the Soviet Union, Russia signed a treaty called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with the Central Powers in March of 1918. But Russia had bounced out of the war in 1917 because they were dealing with an internal conflict in their country where the communists took over. Other results of the war, new countries such as Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia were created, and the country of Poland was reestablished. Poland's going to be the first victim to Hitler in World War II. Just want to point that out. Like I said, Poland was part of the German Empire, and Hitler's going to want that back. Countries such as Estonia, Finland, Latvia, and Lithuania became free countries. The Central Power countries were forced to surrender control of colonies to allies. They had colonies in Africa, had colonies in areas they occupied in the Middle East and Asia. Wilson didn't get everything he wanted, like I said, but he was glad the war was over with and that it was important to maintain democracy. And democracy means that you have a government where the people are free to pick their leaders. That's more like a representative government, but in a democracy you have free elections and the people rule. We don't have kings and queens and dictators and oligarchs controlling their country. Anybody in a democracy can have a say-so in their government. That's what a democracy is. Other results, the Allied forces lost 5 million soldiers. 50,000 American soldiers died. Some say 112,000. So anyway, a lot of people died. A lot of soldiers lost their lives. The Central Powers lost 8 million soldiers. Millions of people were hurt and misplaced. Misplaced because their communities were destroyed. Their businesses were destroyed. Families were destroyed. Many died of influenza, which is a viral infection that affects the lungs, the flu, starvation, and wounds. Economies, businesses, villages, towns, cities, bridges, railroads, roads, tunnels, and lives were ruined because of this great war. The cost of the war was $330 billion. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of zeros there. because of all the equipment and materials and resources that are needed to maintain and keep a war going. Recap, the Versailles Treaty was harsh towards Germany. Remember that word, Versailles Treaty, the treaty that ended World War I. It left a legacy of anger and bitterness, which led to World War II 20 years later. So that Versailles Treaty wasn't a good thing. Here's a political cartoon of Woodrow Wilson presenting the League of Nations to the American government, particularly the Senate. Like I said, the United States didn't join the League of Nations because they didn't want to become involved in other conflicts globally. And the Senate voted it down, and it made Woodrow Wilson feel bad. And remember, the League of Nations was part of his peace plan called the 14 Points. Here's a picture of the peace conference in July the 18th, 1919. The Big Four met. Lord George of Britain, Orlando of Italy, Clemenceau of France, and Woodrow Wilson. So nobody from the Central Powers were invited. And it's like somebody deciding your fate or what to do with you, and you don't have a say-so in that. And like I said again, that's going to be a problem. This right here is an activity I want you to do. And it's a sequence of events during World War I. Number them from 1 to 8. I'm not going to read through these with you. You need to look back throughout the packet to help you sequence these events of the war. That's a wrap. You should have answered Edpuzzle questions and done any activities that the information packet requires you to do. Thank you for listening, and peace.